get you. Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Good Monday to you, Bill.
You're never gonna live me down.
We can't.
You're never. I know.
We just can't. Busy news week in the UFO world. Drone incursions, I feel like, in every base in America and the UK.
Yes.
But that's not the only news of the week. We're going to show off now a sighting that happened in Nevada. Sorry, I'm trying to find Patterson Pass, Nevada recently. My cousin called me. He'd been out camping and had a pretty wild experience. So we'd like to share it with our viewers and our listeners and get people's opinions on it. So joining us from Nevada is Randy Alvarado.
Hey, Randy.
Hey. Hello, y'all. Hey, thanks for having me on. People that are not from Nevada say Nevada. If you're from Nevada, you say Nevada. So,
Is it Nevada?
Nevada.
Nevada?
Oh,
Yes,
the
sir.
New Yorker would have got it right.
Yeah.
But
So,
you
yeah.
took some interesting photos. We seen it before the show began. Now, I know that there's a lot of people talk about the activity near Vegas, especially near the airport. Now, how far away were you camping at this location when you took these photos?
Oh, quite a ways, a couple 100 miles.
Wow.
This is halfway up the state, but along the right-hand edge on the Utah side, but about halfway up the state. This is near Great Basin National Park, which I think is like the 7th darkest sky in the United States. So amazing viewing out in that area for stars.
So you just happened to be camping, and how did you notice what was going on in the sky? Were you stargazing? I mean, what were you doing at the time when this happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were actually out elk hunting and got back to camp. This is relatively early in the night. I want to say maybe 7 o'clock. Photos are probably time-stamped, but we had got back from camping and stargazing, just lit up the campfire stargazing. The night before, we had probably seen 5 or 6 shooting stars, which are just amazing to witness. And so we're looking up the sky, and my brother-in-law says, "What is this?" And it looked like a comet coming in. I mean, the trail on this thing was really long, and it just was burning towards Earth at this tremendous rate of speed. I mean, it was just flying straight down. That's the still. I don't know if you have the one of the trail. I sent you one with the trail coming in. But anyways, this, yeah, there it is. I mean, it's just trailing in. It comes just trailing to the earth. As soon as it gets right above the ground, and this is from us, it's heading east to west. It's just trailing in. When it gets really close to the ground, this thing just stops. I mean, it just comes to like a dead halt.
Wow.
And all of a sudden we see it shifts directions and starts coming towards us at a slow rate of speed. And when it gets up on us, it's just this straight line of about 20, 30 lights. It's a perfectly straight line, and all the lights are perfectly spaced. And it gets over to us. I would say it was no more than maybe 10,000 feet in the air. It felt really, really close. For being so close, though, I was amazed that we couldn't see an outline of something, some kind of shape of a body or something. All we could see was this straight little line of lights. It gets above us, and then it just stops. This thing stops in its tracks and is just hovering above us for between 30 and 40 seconds. You get the phone out, luckily, fast enough. I try to take a video, but I see that it's not picking up any light. So I go to my camera, do the 3-second exposure. I'm able to get 2 or 3 snapshots in this 30 seconds, and then the lights just shut off. And that was the whole experience. Didn't move direction, nothing. It just shut off and it was gone.
No sound? Typical.
Zero sound, no sound whatsoever. Not on the trailing into Earth or the directional shift was there any sound whatsoever.
And let me just point this out because, as Bill probably knows, I talked to part of the station, the owner actually, Warren, and his first reaction was Starlink. And I had to remind him, Starlink doesn't stop. Starlink doesn't stop and hover in place and then just disappear. So
Yeah, there was a lot of people that made that same comment on the post that I posted to my social media account. And I did look at tons of pictures and videos of Starlink after it. And yeah, it does appear that Starlink has multiple lights, but in none of the pictures I saw are they symmetrical and perfectly spaced. It doesn't stop. It doesn't hover. And how could the re-entry, that Starlink doesn't re-enter, and how could it shift directions once it came in? So this thing came
at low altitude
west to east,
too.
and just none of it lines up.
And it's low altitude. You're saying about approximately 10,000 feet above.
I know I don't have
low.
any. It was low. It was really close to us, to like so close that we were getting like really eerie vibes. We were wondering what was going to happen next at that point, and then the lights just shut off.
So it shot off after it was hovering.
Yeah, no, shut off. The lights just went off. You know, Starlink's lights would just stay on and keep traveling. These lights just went out. After 30 seconds, they just turned the lights off.
Wow.
I don't know if they like sensed that we were staring at them. I mean, we were the only two people within 70 miles of any other civilization. And even the closest town is only 3,000 people that's 70 miles north of us. So
that is fascinating that it just disappeared. Naked eye, you couldn't see it anymore. And it was there, and then 1 second it's not. And it just, whether the lights went off or something else happened, it was invisible to you at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And my brother-in-law was standing right there with me, both of us with our just in awe. We just didn't know what to expect next. I mean, it was so close to us. We've just never had anything like that. I've only had 2 experiences in my whole life. The other one was actually 60 miles north of this spot, and it was probably 7 years ago. So I don't know if there's some hot activity in that area. I know that the extraterrestrial highway is kind of near there with Rachel, Nevada, being out there. Area 51 is not extremely far away, but it's not close.
Well, that's a really interesting experience you had, Randy, and the other individual that was involved as well. So,
and what I will do is I'll put copies of the pictures out, and I'll give a date and timestamp, so people are more than welcome to look into it and send us their theories. But like he pointed out, Starlink doesn't stop on a dime, change direction.
No way.
And it sure as hell doesn't just turn off.
I capture the Starlinks all the time when I do sky watches with my camera, and no, they just keep moving in their pattern. It's a train. It looks like a train. They just keep moving in orbit. That's it. They don't stop, and they don't change direction, as Randy indicated. But what's
I saw this.
Go ahead, Randy.
Sorry to interrupt. The Starlink pictures I saw, and I'm sure you guys have more research on it, is they're not perfectly spaced. I mean, they're decently spaced, but they're not perfectly spaced. And the line is not perfectly straight. It seems to be a little off here and there. I mean, I don't know how you could link it perfectly out in space, but this thing was absolutely perfect.
You know what would be an interesting thing to correlate this with? Any kind of radar data that can see if anything was detected, any information, flight radar, anything that we can use to maybe see if there was anything else in the area when you witnessed this, because it would be interesting to see if we can get any kind of radar indication of an object that was doing this kind of movement and stopped where you guys were. That would be amazing if that can be uncovered.
Yeah, I would say, like, from, just the perception of where we were sitting looking at this light, it was probably the length of a football field. It was massive.
Wow.
And it was really low. I'm guessing at 10,000 feet, but it was low.
Wow. Well, Randy, thank you so much for coming on with us and providing this information to the viewers and those that are listening. And anything else comes up, you know where to come, right here with Toby and I, and let us know if anything else develops out of this.
Yeah, and if you guys hear anything, let me know. I know I sent Toby a video that maybe he could extract something from, but I just wasn't able to pull anything with, just a camera phone. So,
right.
Thank you guys. Listen to my story. If you get any feedback, let me know. I appreciate it.
Have a great one. Thank you, Randy.
Great one. Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, gentlemen. Take care.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's
another witness account. I mean,
exactly. Testimony plays plays a part in all of these stories.
And at the hearing, and the first one, I don't count the other one. That was like ridiculous. Where Gillibrand, that was just a mess. But they did mention in the hearing that civilian testimony is also going to be taken into account in the database. It's not just like they even referenced civilian pilots. It's not just military pilots. So they may be also looking at people in a civilian capacity as a witness.
Well, it makes sense because civilian sightings, they're not using classified equipment to film these things. So what's the restriction on releasing photos and videos? You're not releasing sensitive information.
Exactly. Well, we have a person that's not so sensitive. He is the silverback of ufology. He's been involved with this for decades, involved with UFO, UAP research, and his wife was owner of UFO magazine, Don Ecker. So why don't we bring on the one and only silverback of ufology, Don Ecker.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Great
Pleasure
to have
you. Yep.
So, Toby, you want to start it?
I think it should be you, Bill. You were giving me little bits of what he's going to be talking about, and I'm excited.
I had a quick conversation. Actually, it wasn't that quick with Don about a week ago, and we were talking about the controversial figure Bob Lazar. And Don, over the years, has met so many individuals, and in this case, he actually went to Bob Lazar's home along with another individual at the time. Was it Saraday that went with you, or was it the actor that was in Star Trek, Don?
No, it was Richard Saraday.
Richard Saraday. So he actually went to his home and sat down with Bob Lazar. And I think that the public is familiar with the Bob Lazar story, so to speak. But Don has specific insights as being one of the first people to actually interview him. We know that George Knapp was, of course, involved, and he was the one that pretty much uncovered the whole Bob Lazar scenario to begin with. But there is some other interesting tidbits that the public may not be aware of regarding Bob Lazar and the questionability of his and the credibility of his background. So, Don, let us know how that went when you went to see Bob Lazar and some of the information that you uncovered that the public may not be so much aware of other than what Knapp covered and put out there at the beginning when this all started.
Sure. Well, back in those days, and we're talking 1987, 1988, George Knapp, who was the investigative reporter for KLAS Television Channel 8 down in Las Vegas, Nevada, that's how I say it, Nevada, broke a story. He had a series of reports that he would bring on, special interest things, stuff like that. And he brought this fellow on in electronic blackout, going under the pseudonym of Dennis. All right. And there's kind of an inside joke with that, with the name Dennis. But this guy was not identified. And he talked about being hired at an ultra black program out at Area 51, Site S4, where he alleged he was working, he had been hired to work on basically power systems for UFOs, unidentified flying objects. But apparently they had them, they must have identified them as ships, spaceships. Now, this report at the time was electrifying. And when I say electrifying, I'm not talking about just, the constituency in Nevada. I'm talking about this story literally went worldwide. Now, at that time, I was the director of security for a computer bulletin board system called Paranet. All right. Now, Paranet, this was in the very early stages of computers. All right. As a matter of fact, it was about that time. Well, I had just purchased my very first personal computer system from a Radio Shack store called the Tandy 1000 EX. That was my computer. And of course, at that time, I knew very little about PCs, and I went crazy on it. I started decking this thing out with everything I could stick in it. I bought a 40 megabyte hard drive.
Wow.
40 megabytes for $400. All right. That I was able to end up plugging into this thing. And boy, I thought I had something special. And at that time, those computers, for the most part, worked on 5.25-inch floppy disks that were 360K, and then another disk, a 3.5-inch floppy that would hold 750K of data. And of course, that's what was around then. And if you had that kind of stuff, you were doing pretty well in the computer field. And I had discovered in December, as a matter of fact, just about this time of year, in 1987, I had gone online with a modem. Okay, you had to have a modem. The internet was nothing like it is today, to a pay service called CompuServe. And while on CompuServe, I discovered a forum called the Issues Forum. All right. Now, this is all background, okay, on how the Lazar story ended up becoming what it was. Now, on there, I came across some files from a computer bulletin board called Paranet Alpha of the Paranet system. Now, this was the very first computer system, BBS, okay, which ended up being a network that literally spanned the globe as Paranet got out there. And the guy in charge, the guy that began it, was a guy by the name of James Spicer, okay, who was then residing in Fountain Hills, Arizona. Well, as I'm going through there, through this forum, I came across a lot of files. A lot of them dealt with UFO sightings. A lot of them dealt with cryptid creatures. And then the thing that blew up in my head, cattle mutilations. Now, I am a medically retired criminal investigator. I was a police officer and then a detective. And in 1981, 1982, while on duty, I investigated 2 cattle mutilations. Okay. And the whole thing never stuck right with me. Number one, the cases were never solved. As I did more and more research and data gathering, I discovered that this was, well, if you get right down to it, a worldwide phenomenon, but it had been happening all over the United States, even in my own home state, which kind of shocked me, where I originally hailed from, Pennsylvania. Okay. Now, the cattle mutilation investigations I conducted at that time was in the state of Idaho. I was living there. And part of the thing that disturbed me greatly were that these animals were not only mutilated, and when I say mutilated, probably most of you are familiar with the phenomenon today involving cattle, and I might add other animals, horses, and even deer and elk have been discovered mutilated. But that's where usually something like an eyeball would be incised from the skull, from the head. fur or hide would be stripped from the skull. The sexual organs would be removed. The anus would be removed. And here was what I guess you could say shocked me the most. These animals were totally exsanguinated. They had no blood left in the body. There was no blood on the ground. One of these animals was about 30, 35 yards from the rancher's house, okay? Now, this guy had dogs. He had several children, his wife. Nobody heard a word. It happened during the evening, okay? Basically in front of his house. So when I read these, I got in touch with Jim Spicer, and we began a friendship. And later, about a year or so later, he handed the reins of Paranet over to another guy, a very good friend of mine, Mike Corbin. Okay. Now, Mike, who unfortunately died roughly 12, 15 years ago in kind of a mysterious way, but Mike began an organization along with Paranet called MyCap, okay, out of Denver. Mike was living in Denver, Colorado. So Paranet searched all the sources for unusual information, news stories, what have you. And when the George Knapp television special with Dennis, who later turned out to be Bob Lazar, aired, it lit a fuse. You cannot today imagine the excitement that went around the UFO field. And like all things in the UFO field that were out of the ordinary, I guess you could say, this thing blew up. Now, about a year later, okay, Knapp did or maybe it wasn't quite a year, he did another special, only this time he identified Dennis as Bob Lazar. Now, Lazar was living in the Las Vegas area. Lazar gave on TV basically his background. He had been at Los Alamos. He had worked there. And then he met somebody who referred him to EG&G. Now, this part of the story is very electrifying. So after he went public, okay, I was the director of research for UFO Magazine. The publication was begun by my wife in 1986, along with her then partner, a lady by the name of Sherry Stark. They were both owners of UFO Magazine. I came on board in 1988. So somewhere along the way, I made Knapp's acquaintance, and I got in touch with him, and I said, George, I'd like to come down to Vegas. I'd like to meet Bob Lazar. I'd like to interview him. Would you check with him and see if that would be okay? So he did. He came back and said, yeah. So we drove, Richard Saraday and I drove down there and went to his home. Now, Lazar had a very good friend that was probably with him for the next number of years, a guy by the name of Gene Huff. And Huff had been a real estate appraiser. And the guy that knew Gene Huff and subsequently Bob Lazar was John Lear. Now, there is a story in itself, John Lear. I'm sure you've heard the name. His father was William Lear of Lear Sigler Jet Corporation. Okay. He was a pilot, an airline pilot, not commercial, but he flew cargo. During the war in Vietnam, he was with an airline called Continental Airline, which was under contract for the Central Intelligence Agency. He has often been accused of being a CIA agent. No, nothing to that at all. But he did work for a CIA contracted airline. And around 85, 86, a guy that he had known in Southeast Asia had been over at RAF Bentwaters during the 1980 infamous Christmas incident where UFOs came in right around the airbase, okay, and did a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff today is known about it. There's other things that are not so well known. For example, some of these UFOs came in where they had tactical nuclear weapons stored. And the reason they were there, along with A-10 aircraft and other things, was if you weren't around then, or if you forgot, that was a very tenuous year, 1980. The Soviet Union, which was still in existence then, had just invaded Afghanistan. Poland and several other Eastern European nations were by this time sick and tired of the Russian Soviet iron fist. Poland was on the brink of a revolution, okay? There was a guy in charge of all the trade unions over there by the name of Lech Walesa, all right? Later became the president of Poland. But the fear was, along with the Soviet incursion into Afghanistan, there was fears of war. We were then, our president was Jimmy Carter, who was seen as inept and ineffectual, if not downright incompetent, okay? A lot of people were very, very nervous. And the bottom line was, okay, they were afraid that the Russians would do to Poland what they did to Hungary in 1956. And basically what happened there, the Hungarians were trying to overthrow the Russians. They actually had a war going on inside of Hungary, and the Soviet Union set in divisions of tanks, okay, which crushed the rebellion. So that was the fear. But this guy that had been at Bentwaters told John Lear that, hey, look, that whole UFO thing is real. It really happened. There's some very crazy stuff going on over there. This base had nuclear weapons, okay, and the UFOs seemed overly interested in the UFO, in the nuclear weapons storage depots that were at Bentwaters. So Lear took off. Now that's a story in itself. The John Lear story would take a separate broadcast. But anyway, on Paranet, I had read a paper that Lear had uploaded. He knew Jim Spicer. He uploaded a document to Spicer about the overall UFO situation. And you probably can still find it on the web today. It was called the John Lear Hypothesis. But I read it. I read it in December of 87. And when I read that, I got to tell you, it was some wild stuff. So I contacted Spicer and I said, who is this guy? And he told me, and he said, normally, he said, I wouldn't have put something like that up except for who John Lear is. And I said, okay, well, Jim, I want to talk to him. So could you give me his phone number? Well, he did. And in January of 88, I called Lear up. And during this conversation, which lasted, almost 3.5, 4 hours, all right, I had my head turned around. So a week later, all right, now this is one thing I got to say about Lear. He carried through. About a week later, UPS pulled up in front of my townhouse. All right. Driver came up carrying this big package. It was about 10 pounds, and it was everything Lear, had documented up to that point, including a couple of videotapes.
Do you still have that in your possession, Don? I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you still have those in your possession?
Some of them.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Hey, look, I've moved from that point to L.A. and from L.A. up to the Valley, from the Valley to our house now. So, some of that stuff I'm sure got lost. But at any rate, I still have some of it, yeah. But what I was going to say is one of those documents that Lear had sent me concerned a ground penetrating missile that, according to Lear, was designed to be nuclear tipped. All right. Now, everybody is aware of so-called bunker busters, right? You know what that is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, a nuclear bunker buster, to me, seemed like overkill. Now, I was in the military. I served in Vietnam. I was wounded in combat. And so, military stuff, I'm, at least at that point, I was pretty much up on all of that. And I asked Lear, I said, well, where did you get this? He said, from a scientist I know. Well, can you tell me who it is? No. And I said, okay, well, why would they want a nuclear-tipped missile? He said, well, obviously, to wipe out the underground alien bases if things turn hostile. And I said, what? I said, what do you mean if things turn hostile? He said, well, you heard what happened down in New Mexico, right? And I said, I don't think so. He said, well, there was an underground facility down there that was jointly manned by both American military, primarily special forces, the elite of the elite military, and aliens. Now, one thing I prided myself on when I was a cop, and I'll just be very blunt. I have a good bullshit indicator, And when I heard that, I got a little fuzzy, and I said, John, you got anything to support that? Where did you get that? Well, I got it from another scientist. Another scientist. Well, who was that? Once again, he wouldn't tell me. Well, I really started to dig. When I get my teeth locked into something and something ain't quite smelling right, I go basically balls to the wall. And I found out the first scientist was Bob Lazar that gave him this nuclear missile thing. The second scientist was a guy by the name of Paul Benowitz. Now, Benowitz is infamous in this field. There are so many rabbit holes, guys, I could go down with this story. All right.
But did you ask Bob Lazar about this when you met him in person at his home? Did you confront him?
Oh, hell yes. Of course I did.
You bet I did. You're Robbie Silverback after all. So I mean, what was his response on that and everything else that was going on? Because actually, we might have to do a 2-part series with you because there's a lot of information that we have to get to here. But we only got
Well,
like
it depends on if my check's in the mail.
I'm still waiting on mine.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I did ask Lazar about that. Now, one thing about Lazar, and I'll tell you this up front, in many respects, he's a no BS guy. All right. And later, as I got to know him quite a bit better, and his buddy, Gene Huff, and there's a picture in there of me in his office. And if whoever's doing the photographs, there's a Lazar behind the desk. There's me sitting in front of the desk. We were basically videotaping this, and Huff is right next to me. Do you got that photo?
Do we have that, Eric?
No, that's Vicky and I at the ID4 ET highway thing.
I may have missed that photo, Don.
Okay. Well, at any rate, they began, because they kind of figured John, in some respects, was maybe one cylinder down in his 4-cylinder engine. Okay. And they began often screwing with him or outright ridiculing him. And when I asked Bob about this nuclear tipped missile, basically it was called, just came to me, Project Excalibur is what it was called. All right, at least this is what was on the documents, Project Excalibur. Lazar said, no, there was no nuclear tipped missile on that. And then the Dulce Mesa deal in New Mexico, where the special forces and aliens were at. Supposedly there had been a big shootout between the aliens and the special forces. And this is what I was told. There were bodies killed on both sides. And where did this come from? This scientist that ended up being Paul Benowitz. Well, let's stop right there and back up a little bit. In 1981, okay, Benowitz, all right, was a scientist, had a scientific lab called Thunder Labs. He had contracts with the Air Force, and they basically, his home and business was right across the highway from the Manzano weapons area. All right. And one day, Benowitz, who was up to his eyeballs in UFO stuff, everything from abductions to sightings, military encounters, you name it, saw something strange over on the Manzano field. And he began investigating it. And somewhere along the line, he became, for who, God knows who, convinced that aliens were not only here, but they were hostile. Whatever it was he saw over there, and it kind of sounded initially like it was a UFO or UFOs, plural. He began to get a little crazy about this, and he called up the Air Force. He talked to the security people over there, told them what he observed. All right. Well, unfortunately for Paul Benowitz, he had stepped into a deep pile of doo-doo. They were carrying on some type of ultra top secret investigation, experiment, whatever. I think that the National Security Agency, NSA, was involved in this. And somewhere over at the Air Force Base, they decided this guy has got to be shut up. Now, in the meantime, Benowitz had even gone to his state senator. They flew out to Dulce in a small aircraft, flew around this area looking for the alien underground base, all this other business. And he began making a hell of a lot of noise, which included, getting to the point where whatever it was he had seen, the military was freaking out because of all the light that Benowitz put on this. So somebody made the decision, well, we've got to basically hit and run this guy. And an AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, agent by the name of Rick Doty threw at that time, an extremely prominent UFO researcher and author by the name of Bill Moore, the guy who wrote the very first book on Roswell. Okay. Moore and Doty were working hand in glove. And Doty passed some basically fraudulent documents to Moore to hand to Paul Benowitz.
Wow.
Now, Benowitz was ambushed from all directions. Now, here's a little something that most people are totally ignorant of.
But Don, before you continue that thought, is this to totally embarrass and discredit Benowitz when he was to come forward with these documents? They knew all along that this was a plan.
Right.
This was a plan to destroy this man's credibility.
Not only his credibility, they destroyed the man.
Right.
Okay. One of the people involved in this, and this is going to should tarnish his reputation, was Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Hynek gave Benowitz a computer system, and you can only guess how that computer system was compromised. Okay. And when I say that, what I'm referring to is Benowitz believed he started getting electronic signals from the aliens into this computer. And he was passing them out to researchers like John Lear. A lot of those documents Lear sent me from his scientist was this disinformation Benowitz was sending out. Of course, Benowitz had no knowledge of this. But in the summer of 1989, at the International MUFON Symposium, which was held in Las Vegas, Nevada, William Moore was one of the featured star speakers, okay? And in his over 2-hour speech, he told the audience that he had basically been working hand in glove with military intelligence because he was trying to get to the bottom of the UFO mystery. Now, Moore also said he never took a dime from them, but at the end of that speech, and I was there, all right, I saw it. The audience went spastic, totally spastic. And, excuse me, my Bailey the Beagle just saw a delivery being sent here. Hang on.
That's fascinating. It's amazing because, Toby, we can relate to what Don is saying to what's going on right now. The misinformation, disinformation that's put out there so people could take it like a carrot stick. And
it's everywhere. And I warn people, be careful when you're offered information that seems too good to be true with nothing in return. But to change subjects real fast while I have a second to hop in here, him speaking about those, his documents, his records, shout out to David Marler for this Frisbee I got when I got an exclusive tour of the National UFO Historic Record Center in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Speaking to these documents, like these collections and videotapes that Don's talking about, anybody, any researcher that has that kind of collection should think about eventually handing it off to this organization that's doing much needed work in preserving UFO history.
Okay. Are we ready to continue?
Yes.
Okay. Moore committed professional suicide in that presentation. All right. He was shocked. Now, at that time, all right, and even today to an extent, that was one way to discredit a UFO researcher, whether it was correct or not, by accusing them of being a double agent of the Central Intelligence Agency, AFOSI, whatever. All right. Moore, who was very prominent at that time, basically blew up in front of hundreds of people, and subsequently he disappeared from the scene. But he lived here in LA, and we decided every 4, 5, 6 weeks, Moore and I would meet for brunch. Now, I knew that he was keeping an eye on our magazine and me and Vicky, reporting back to his intelligence people. I knew that. All right. And I'm sure he knew that I was trying to do all the digging I could do on what he was up to. And during one meeting, we had over brunch, I was talking to him about Benowitz, and he would get very touchy about the whole story, because I knew, all right, what he did, and he was, in many regards, a very arrogant man. He was also convinced of his superior intellect. He was smarter than everybody. That's what he believed. And I'm there talking to him about when he handed these fraudulent documents to Benowitz. And I said, well, Bill, good God, you were a very prominent out there UFO researcher. How did you feel about that? All right. He said, well, in a lot of ways, he said, I had to do it because if I wouldn't have, then my connections with these guys, the military guys, would have been severed. But I cautioned Paul. I said, Paul, don't accept this at face level. Blah, 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 blah. Well, in my career, not only with the magazine, but as a cop, I've interviewed probably several thousand people over the years. And as a result of that, if you are an investigator, you've got to be able to read the person you're talking to, at least to some extent. All right. Now, Paul Benowitz, and I knew Benowitz, not very well, but I did know him. I had talked to him. I knew Benowitz was one of those guys that would get so excited and worked up over this that, his common sense would go out the window. So Moore telling me that he cautioned Benowitz about his documents and what have you, don't accept it on face value. I knew that was crap. All right. Then Moore told me that as he was sitting there talking to Paul smoked 28 cigarettes in a 45-minute period.
Oh my gosh.
He said he would light one, smoke half of it, put it out, immediately pull another one out, light it up, and more counted them. Now, to me, I'm thinking to myself, what kind of a guy would watch somebody do that, knowing that you in part were responsible for it? But there was so much more. Now, this is all wrapped up in the overall Bob Lazar gestalt, okay?
Don, I don't mean to interrupt. We got about 4 minutes left. So if you can get to maybe we'll have to bring you back, but the Lazar thing, I'm just going to cut right to the chase. You met him. You knew the individual that he was in contact with that may have had some connection or insight to S4. But your impressions of Bob Lazar, first of all, was he credible in your view? And also, why is this guy not considered to be at a hearing as a whistleblower to what he witnessed?
Well, it's very simple. It's very simple, at least from me looking at it. Lazar, all those years ago, and it's been over 30 odd years, has always remained in my gray basket, which means there's a lot of what he said that I totally accepted. And at the time, I knew Knapp very well, George Knapp, and believe me, I bored in on Knapp about this guy, about Lazar. And the biggest problem with the whole Lazar story is he claimed to have academic degrees, but they're not available. Nobody can find them, okay? And this has always been the big stumbling point with the Bob Lazar story. Now, Knapp told me that he had a process where he could evaluate whether somebody was telling him the truth or not. And that included, he knew other people long before Lazar on stories he worked on that had claimed to work out at the site, that basically he would ask them questions and then make notes. Like, for example, where was the mess hall or the cafeteria? What kind of tables did they have? What kind of chairs did they have? What color were the walls? How would you get to the bathroom? Okay, which way would you have to go? And he said, Lazar hit that 100%. He knew. There was one more thing about Lazar. He took people out there to the site on Wednesday nights because that's when they flew these exotic vehicles, regardless of where they came from, whether they were black budget military craft or recovered alien craft. He took them out there, and one of the people he took out there was John Lear. And they ended up being chased by the security forces out there. So Lazar knew something. I mean, just the fact that he knew when they were flying these things, all right, which would have been very secret, okay, to the public at large, but not to Lazar. So there were a lot of reasons I thought this guy was on to something. But there's also the possibility that they read his character. The guy is a nonconformist, all right? Bob Lazar is a nonconformist. Also, another individual that what I picked up from him is that basically he had a smugness about him, that I'm brighter than everybody else here. Well, he might have been, all right? He might have been. But on a personal level, I cannot say I like the guy. But I can say that I respected his intellect and the story that he had. Now, why could they not take him to Congress? The first and foremost thing would be his academic background. Now, that would be easy to solve, okay, for me, all right? Who were your professors? Who were the people that you were sitting in class with? Where did you have these classes at, et cetera, et cetera? And then do a little background research. go back to the university, see if what he said was true. The halls that he was in for lectures and what have you. That would be one way of doing it. But George Knapp, tried to track down his degrees, never could. Now, there was one more thing before we got a break.
Yeah, got about a minute.
Allegedly, the exotic material that Lazar worked on these UFO power plants was called Element 115, Element 115. And according to, well, not Lazar. Lazar never told me this, but his buddy Gene Huff did, that he had smuggled some of that element out and it was secured in a secret place. Now, if you follow the Lazar story,
he's been raided.
He's been traveled around. He's been raided by the feds.
Yep.
All right. So there's a hell of a lot there, guys, that I just cannot dismiss.
Interesting. Toby?
That was just awesome to listen to, and I think we do have to do it again.
Yeah, Don, we got to bring you back.
You're a wealth of knowledge, and I could just listen to everything you're telling us, and I know there's more to it, so we got to bring you back and dive further into this, I feel like.
Yes. This needs further exploration, to say the least.
Time goes by fast when you have a good guest, man. I hate it.
Well, Don, thank you so much. And Don is also the co-host of UAP Crossfire, which airs Thursday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on KGRADB.com, as well as his own standalone show, Don with his co-hosts Mark Center and Gary Cassell. So tune into that at Stock Matters Radio on Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. So again, Don, Toby and I thank you for coming on, and we definitely look forward to having you on again.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right. See you next week.
Run.